We have been to 4 different Harbor Freights, and finally the moment has happened.
Somebody got them a new toy.
Are you happy now?
I'm happy now.
Do we have to go to another Harbor Freight?
No. Unless you want to.
Can you please put that on camera?
Unless something is wrong with this, we do not need to go back to Harbor Freight.
Ever?
Unless I need to buy something else or feel like looking around.
But not today.
I don't have to go back to Harbor Freight until you have to go back to a craft store.
I don't need to go to the craft store today.
In that case, I don't need to go back to Harbor Freight today. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So, it only took me so long to figure out that a Shop-Vac just wasn't going to cut it for dust collection. I have it hooked up to a dust deputy, which has been working awesome, but while it works great on certain hand tools, it just did not work for larger things, including the bandsaw, which has a 4-inch port. So, voila! Went down to the Harbor Freight and they put their dust collection system on sale. It was $185, give or take. 2 horsepower motor. Looking at it online from the reviews, there were really only 2 problems. Some people complained that even though it has a 2 horsepower motor, that the CFM wasn't as good as the $500 versions that are out there from Fox and Jet and everybody else. And my first thought with that is, well, okay, that's fine. I didn't pay $500. I'm not expecting to get the same amount out of that. So I think this will allow me to do what I need to do around here, and it's going to be a whole lot better than just the Shop-Vac, which I was using. The other thing was people complained about the motors having problems. Sound like it may have even been the capacitor, but for the price, I'm willing to gamble. A lot of people also had no problems out of it. So I am going to go ahead and start putting this thing together and see how I like it and let you all ride along. Welcome back. Instruction manual. Box of hardware. One item of note, this is not your usual flexible hose that you see that you connect things. This is a very stiff hose, very strong chemical smell, so very strong off-gassing. This one is the one for permanently mounting on the unit. Appears to have a bend almost to the shape that it needs to go. Very heavy duty rubber. Does not appear to have a wire core. It appears to be all plastic, just thicker in portions than the other. I don't feel a wire, so I don't think there's one in there. I think it's just a plastic that is thicker to mimic a wire core. Okay, the base unit that everything mounts to. No sharp edges. Paint's fairly good. Welding is okay, not bad. Certainly not perfect, but okay. Just looking at it, it's kind of a little bit warped right now, but once everything mounts, that should balance out okay. Styrofoam box definitely took a beating, but I don't see anything per se. Four casters, all four lockable. Plastic handles, rubber strap, well, rubber gasket. 4-inch port. That rubber gasket in there goes to this, it appears. Lock rings for the rubber hose. One metal bracket for something. One very heavy electric motor with either an impeller fan or a squirrel cage. I'm assuming it's an impeller fan. 4-inch Y connector, cap for one end. .5-micron dust bag. Plastic dust bag. And one metal piece for joining the two together. A few things of note. The parts that were sliding around did put some scratches in the capacitor housing. So there's some plastic scratches in here. There's also a ding and a bent fin right here. Not bad at all. Again, like I've said before, it wouldn't be something from Harbor Freight if you didn't have to do a little bit of a cleanup on it. So not bad enough that I'm worried about it. The metal has a little bit of play to it. Again, once this thing is mounted and stable and sturdy, I don't think it will be a problem, but there is a little bit of play in the metal itself that the motor attaches to. So as long as the motor is somehow supported on this end, I don't see it being a problem, because I think the motor itself will mount. That's where the weight's going to be held, and I think this will be separate. I don't know if you can see it, but as was mentioned, it is an impeller, not a squirrel cage. And everything else looks to be in one piece. Okay, no surprises from the initial unboxing. Like I was saying, the box was a little bit torn up on the inside. The outside of the box was pristine, so I think this is a case of the internal structure of the styrofoam could have been better. The package of wheels appeared to have bounced around, broke some of the styrofoam walls loose, and as they were bouncing around, they put some scratches on the motor housing, bent one of the fins. Not bad at all, easy to fix myself, cosmetic only. So everything else parts wise appears to be in good shape. In summary, the plastic tube has a strong off-gassing, the solid tube that comes with it. It is not the flexible tube like you're normally seeing. This is a very hard rubber tube. It's not a wire core, it doesn't appear. It appears to be a plastic core ring tube. I don't know the exact name you use for it. The caster's pretty good shape. All four are locking wheels. The bottom plate, a little bit kind of flimsy, warped, but I think as soon as we get the wheels on it, get the weight on top, that's going to flatten right out, no problem. So let's start putting everything together and let's see what happens. I'm even going to follow the manual. So as you can see, unlike what most people are doing nowadays, where you get a nice little pretty container with a cardboard backing and paper, in this case you get a bag of parts. I will assume that everything is here. Okay, now that everything is out of the box and all of the screws are separated, let's go ahead and start putting everything together. Now, this is one of those cases where the manual at the back includes a picture, an assembly diagram. This is really important because the wording that is used in the instructions are not very clear. So we're going to step through it and I'll show you exactly what it's showing. But to give you an example, the first one doesn't mention anything about lock washers, and it only mentions going through one washer. The reality is it's changed so that you now use 2 washers and a lock washer instead of a locking nut. So that is a difference in the manual. So for the wheels, the casters, what you're going to use is this bolt here, 2 of these small washers, a lock washer, and this nut. We'll go through the black plate and this caster. So let me go ahead and give you a little bit better view of a picture for this. Okay, so the way this works is you'll take the bolt and one of the smallest washer, and then that will go through the bottom, or from the top through to the bottom of your plate. The caster will then go into place. An additional washer, then the lock washer, that's the one that has a little cut groove in it, and finally your nut. The head is a Phillips, and the nut is a 10mm. And you will repeat this for all 16 of these. Okay, and that is all 4 wheels. The small washers, small lock washers, small nuts, and small bolts are all completely consumed by those. So every one of those that was in the pack is now complete with that wheel assembly. Again, there is a nut that is about the same size that is a lock nut. That's not the one you're using on this part of the project. Now that the wheels are installed, on to the next part. Okay, now we're going to attach the collector supports to the base plate. Looking at the assembly instructions, this will be using the built-in nuts that are soldered, well, that are welded onto the base plate. So for this one, we'll need a quantity of 6 bolts, 6 washers, and 6 lock washers. These will be the larger ones, so this will be these nuts, these washers, and these lock washers. Okay, as was mentioned, there are 2, 4, 6 places to attach these. All 6 of them are welded nuts underneath. So we will be using only the bolt, the washer, and the lock washer to connect these. In this case, it's a washer, then a lock washer, and then the bolt. The size of these bolts are 14 millimeter. You are basically tightening them down until the lock washer compresses. The whole point of a lock washer is that it's under stress, and when you tighten it down, the two edges grip into the bolt and the washer to prevent your bolt from naturally loosening over time from vibrations. And repeat for the other two. Now, when doing this step, it's very important to make sure you have these lined correctly. Basically, the piece that goes inward needs to go inward toward the center. So basically all three of these, the part that's closer to one side needs to go toward the middle of your work. Okay, and that part is done. Okay, for the next step, you're going to attach the motor assembly to the base. The motor assembly has a bracket that has to be installed first. The fan motor assembly will then be attached to both this and the bracket at the same time. So this bracket will need to be attached here. The motor assembly will then be attached to this and these. This part uses the same bolt, washer, and lock washer as the previous steps for the 4 bolts that hold this unit into the bottom. The setup you're using for this is exactly the same as you use for these. 1 bolt, 1 lock washer, 1 regular washer. Because of the proximity to the bracket, an extension will likely be needed. Now you will attach the entire motor fan assembly to this unit. The 2 holes here will use the same bolt, washer, lock washer combo in these 2 holes that you used here. The 4 bolts here, which go through your electric motor, will use a bigger version of the same bolt with 2 washers, a lock washer, and a nut. As you can imagine, this unit is very heavy. You may or may not want to get help. Because there is side-to-side play this way on the holes of this bracket, it's probably important to put these in first before installing these. But there's also play this direction to help line these up. So whatever you put in, don't tighten anything down quite yet. As was stated, you'll use the same bolt, lock washer, and washer for these two. So for the motor itself, you'll use the 4 longer bolts that are basically the same size as these but longer. You'll also use the larger washer. This is the biggest washer that came in the kit. This is actually going to use 2 of these in addition to the same lock washer that was used before. So for each of these, you'll do the bolt, then a washer, and on the bottom side, another washer, a lock nut, and the larger nut on the bottom. If you find that you've got a gap right here that is preventing the motor from sitting all the way down, then you may need to put a pair of vice grips on here just to squeeze it together long enough to thread your bolts. These nuts are also 14 millimeter. One thing of note, for this part here, I used the larger washer than I used here. Now, even in the manual, it actually shows using washer 14, 15, one being the flat washer, one being the lock washer, on every one of these parts. So it shows 14, 15 over here and 14, 15 up there. In addition to 14, 15 over here. So according to the picture, you would use the same washer and lock washer on both this, this, and this. However, there were a grand total of 8 of these bigger washers. Looking at this parts list for a washer, there is no washer in here that shows a quantity of 8. 8 just happened to be the number that you would use if you were swapping these out with a bigger one. And with these being larger holes, I basically assumed that those would be where the bigger ones would go. So this is one of those cases where the manual and what came in the package does not 100% line up. But logically, it makes sense that that would be the way it goes. So going forward, hopefully I don't run into any additional issues. We will find out as we're going. Okay, for everything else of install, it's going to be higher up. So at this point, we will go ahead and get this thing off of the bench onto the floor to complete the installation process. Okay, the next pieces are the 4-inch air outlet and the gasket. The gasket has a side facing up and down. One side's completely flat, one side has 2 ridges. The picture does not really show one way or the other whether the raised part should be up or down. Logically, I believe that the raised part will go up because this piece will kind of fit into here better than the other way around. So I don't think it really matters, but I am going to go ahead and put the ridges up. This one uses a quantity 6 of the last nut set that's really left. It has a built-in washer basically on the top of the head. It also uses the same washer we were using on the bases, the small one, and the lock nut. So the remaining set of 6 nuts go with these, and those will be lock nuts that have the plastic ring inside. So bolt, washer, lock nut. And that gets repeated on all 6 bolts. Both the head of the bolt and the lock nut are 10 millimeter. The next piece that gets attached is the support ring. This uses built-in threads, so all you need in this case are the bolts. So interestingly enough, the manual shows that you are still using both the 14 and 15 washer set. You have 6 of the lock washers, but we're missing 6 washers. I happen to have the size washer I need. I'm going to just have to assume that the install kit is missing 6 washers. So bolt, lock washer, washer, 2, 4, 6 into this unit. You'll notice there are metal clips. The metal clips face down, and the outlet goes on the same side as your motor. Because you're screwing into very thin metal, I would be very careful with these. In theory, if they do get stripped out, you could just drill it out and put bolts and nuts. And that one's my fault. Your bag support does need to go underneath this. Like I said before, it wouldn't be Harbor Freight if you didn't have to deal with stuff. So the picture shows using a washer and a lock washer. There were no washers left, so I pulled from my supply and used those. Using just a lock washer against this metal would do no good, doesn't make any sense. However, with both a washer and a lock washer, these go on fine, but the one up front, where you're trying to put both this and that through, it's a problem. Honestly, I don't see these working out. I'm going to remove the lock washer, use just the washer that I use from my collection, and put this together. and that one just stripped out. I may just get bigger bolts, put nuts on the back. For now, we can continue on and we'll come back to that. But just so you know, that's kind of what I've run into so far. Yeah, the more I read the manual, it's not broken English like a lot of the things you get nowadays, but step 7, connect the filter bag support to the collector support and collector. Thread in bolts 16 through the collector support and through the filter bag support into the collector. So at least from these instructions it shows no washers at all. So technically nowhere does it actually tell you to attach these. And it seems that the picture and these show different amounts of washers and nuts. But yeah, at any rate, things have gone together well. Minus just, like I said, just be wary. Okay. Next is figuring out how to get these two hose clamps apart. Ta-da! It's like magic rings. When trying to get this on, reaching up from the back side to kind of push on things helps at the top. Basically there's a sewn seam. Just get that right up underneath that lip. Okay. Not really a fan of these bands, but they're fairly self-explanatory. Basically it's a little lever, tighten, loosen, and then this part overlaps. So tighten, loosen. And the part over here with the teeth goes over top of the other one. And engages into the little teeth and just tighten. Now you may have to go a little bit loose to be able to actually tighten it all the way. In my case I went dead center, so it's a grand total of 5 holes. I've got 2 on one side empty, 2 on the other side empty. I'm dead center. And that should take care of the bag. Same concept. This has to go inside the 3 supports, which makes it fun. As you can see, the bag will not stay up on its own. They give you these 3 little clips, but it came from Harbor Freight. Did you think they were going to work? I suggest doing what I'm about to do, masking or painter's tape. That one just so happened to be next to the last. Okay, your two bags are attached. Now here's the funny part. Step 10, insert the filter bag. Step 11, install the collection bag. Step 12, attach the handle. How do you think you put these nuts on? I think I'll remove this one. Basically, black handle, two black bolts that are hex, and two of these. So make note, install the handle before the bags. And there you have it. One thing I noticed when I powered it up is that this thing does appear to pull a lot of juice. So the power down here in the basement is not exactly the best in the world. And I have a feeling I might throw a breaker, but I'm going to power it up again. Ta-da! One item of note, this is where your 4-inch hose will attach to your devices. You can either plug one hose directly on, or there's actually a T adapter. Interestingly enough, I mean, Y adapter. Technically, they don't really mention the Y adapter in the instructions. It just shows a picture of it later on. So, yeah. Okay, one Phillips screw and washer. I have to remove this. Then put your screw back in. Okay. From what I've been told, you can only use one of these at a time. You can't use both. So you keep one of them. Well, technically you can connect both of these out to your shop, but only one of them can actually be drawing in air at a time. This doesn't feel like it's very tight. I will probably pull this off and put a silicone sealant inside to make sure it doesn't leak air, and then put it back together. But now you attach your hose to here. It does not come with any of the hose. You'll have to buy those separately. It should be your standard 4-inch shop vacuum hose. So, bolt, well now, you are not a complicated knot. Now's when I need my wife's fabric scissors.